Welcome to Friendeavor, the podcast, the weekly podcast where we explore the highs and lows of friendship with your hosts, Danielle and Kayla.
As we journey through life, our friendships often evolve and change, ebb and flow, and sometimes even come to an end. Danielle and I are lifelong advocates for the power of friendship, and we are here to guide all of us through the many challenges and joys that come with building and maintaining strong, meaningful connections with those around us.
Join us each week as we deep dive into the intricacies of friendship, from navigating conflicts to fostering new relationships and everything in between. With insightful interviews, personal anecdotes, and expert advice, Friendeavor is the perfect podcast for anyone looking to strengthen their bonds with the people they love.
So, whether you are on the go, taking care of chores, or just settling in, get ready to explore the world of friendship on Friendeavor, the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Friendeavor. I'm your host, Danielle, with my lovely co-host and sister-in-law, Kayla.
Hi, guys. Welcome back.
This week, we are breaking down a topic that we've actually mentioned quite a bit already in our 3 previous episodes on the show. This week, we are talking about the friendship pyramid.
Yes, and I'm super excited for this because, like I said in last week's episode, this is the best visual tool I think that Danielle has created since she started Friendeavor, because it really puts things into perspective. You really get to categorize, okay, where do these special people fall in my life? And I mean, what kind of things put them in these tiers? So very excited for this. So Danielle, do you want to introduce it and kind of tell us a little bit about the background of the friendship pyramid, how it came to be, and what it is?
Yeah, I really like visual aids. So every book that I have put out has not followed like a typical novel style, like book style. All of them have got graphics and fill in the blanks and that kind of stuff.
It's interactive.
Interactive, yeah, because I really love the model version. So the friendship pyramid is like a conceptual model of your friendship. So it categorizes and represents different levels, different tiers of relationship in one's life. So it gives you a framework of understanding like the varying degrees of closeness, because not everyone in your life is the same, like as close as someone else, right? You've got different friends, you got different connections, and just different significances in individuals than you have with others, and that's okay. You don't have to worry about like, oh, where do I fall on someone's friendship pyramid? Like if you're super close with someone or if you're not. It's not like a popularity contest of how are you going to be on everyone's tiers or pyramid. Um, so that's where it was born out of. I love models. I love visual aids. It helps me to understand my friendships better.
Okay, so the first thing that might pop into people's heads is, isn't this tool like so toxic? Isn't like that the last thing we're supposed to be doing, categorizing people and separating them into groups?
Yeah.
So,
Normally, I would agree with that separation and all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah. So with this tool, what is the purpose of separating people into groups?
So yeah, it is not the most like thoughtful thing to like segregate or split people up. But the
Right.
friendship pyramid is an extremely personal tool. Okay, like I wouldn't even say sit down and write it out. I would just think of it, like I said, a conceptual model, what you think, like a concept, a construct that you use. You can sit down and write it out if you need that actual practice, but it's just supposed to help you understand your friendships. It's
Yeah.
not even a negative thing. Like, oh yeah, I gotta put them down here because I don't like that. That's not what it's for. It's really a positive thing to, and we're gonna get into this later, but really manage your expectations of friendship.
Yes.
And like I
Yeah.
said, I'm gonna give it a spoiler alert here, but that's the big thing that we're gonna be talking about in this when we break it down. So here's let's just get right into it. So a couple of the reasons that this kind of thing is important is to understand your relationship dynamics. Okay, so before I got to know you, right? There's a little bit of an age gap between us. I would have put
Yeah.
you in the friend tier. Okay. I didn't have a relationship with you. I knew you. I was friends with your older siblings. So I would have considered them good friends, but I didn't know you and I didn't spend any time with you. But you're like a friend of the family and that kind of thing. So even 3, 4 years ago, that's where you would have fallen for me. So it really just helps you understand your dynamics, and like I said, the varying degrees of closeness with your people. That way you don't have to get heartbroken when you're not invited to someone's party or something like that because you're like, "Well, I don't really spend time with them anyways, so why
Right.
would I suddenly start getting an invitation to, like, these monumental things in their life?" So it
Right.
just
It
helps to
really
put
puts
it
it
in
into
perspective.
perspective.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. The friendship pyramid also can help you, like, nurture the meaningful connections. So, let's say that you've been putting a lot of effort into making a relationship happen, a friendship happen, that it's it's not really gonna benefit you or them. Recognizing the tiers, the tier system, not even the individuals within the tiers, but just recognizing the tiers themselves helps you, like, allocate your time and your energy and your resources more effectively. If you're spending a bunch of money getting gifts for people who are only in your friend tier because you think that you have to do that for them because there's certain popularity or whatever, if you realize, "Hey, I'm not actually that close to this person," it just helps you recognize the connection that you have and allows you to foster, like, deeper connections with the people who matter actually the most to you and who are your good friends and your best friends, which I think we should actually talk about before we go any farther because we didn't really mention this. There are 5 tiers to the pyramid. Pop quiz, do you know what they are?
Ooh, okay, so the very bottom is acquaintances, right?
Yes.
Okay, then we've got friends,
Yep.
best friends?
Close. That's the 4th one.
Oh,
It's not a very clever name for it, but it's the 3rd tier is good friends.
good friends, okay.
Yeah.
Friends, good
I
friends,
probably
best
should
friend, spouse.
rename that something, but that's just like the way like, "Oh, yeah, they're my good friend," you know, and again, we're gonna get into that more later, but,
Yeah.
um, those are the 5 tiers that we're talking about. But this next point, and I've already mentioned it, I think this is the most important thing that the friendship pyramid gives you. It helps you manage your expectations, okay?
Yes.
You need realistic expectations because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for hurt. You're setting
Mhm.
yourself up for, like, just like disunity, like say you're part of some like a bigger thing, say the church, and you think that someone did you wrong because you had an unrealistic expectation of who they were to you, it just causes unnecessary pressure, you know, or
Yep.
disappointment or misunderstanding. So that's really where this pyramid stemmed from for me. Was like I need to know where I could possibly be setting myself up for hurt because I'm not understanding the actual relationships I have with these people.
Right.
Um, so a realistic expectation just helps you not get hurt.
Yep. Yeah, I've had to refer back to the friendship pyramid, like, a few times since you've created it because, not that I've written it down on paper, but just certain things that happen, certain expectations you have, certain things that you think other people should or should not expect of you.
Yeah.
It helps you conceptualize, okay, so where does this person fall? Okay, are they really like I've tried to make them in this tier, but really in reality they're in this tier.
Yeah.
So, how much time should I invest in fill in the blank?
Yeah, and it makes you want like it makes you look at yourself and say, "Why am I trying so hard to force this person into this certain tier?" Like if they're a friend, that is totally fine to have a lot of and I use air quotes with this, but just friends. Okay? Like it's okay to have a lot of people in that category. That doesn't mean you love them any less. It really boils down to time and desire to spend time with those people. So like how much time do you actually spend together and how much time do you want to spend with those people? Um and then for you, like I know we've talked about before that in the past you may have had trouble saying like no or setting a boundary for yourself. Using the friendship pyramid tool helps you realize, okay, the people in these upper tiers, they deserve more of my yeses than the people in the lower tiers. It's not that I
Absolutely.
have
It's helped me set
disdain.
boundaries.
Yeah, it's not that I have disdain for the people in these lower tiers. It's just
Yeah,
like it's all about time and resources and
absolutely.
energy and all that stuff. So um that just is one example of setting a boundary in that. Moving on to some of the other benefits, if you will, of this is it helps you recognize where your support system's at for people. The pyramid highlights the importance of the different tiers of the relationships of one's life. Every tier, every single tier is gonna have some level of support and companionship and emotional connection, but by recognizing, uh, the relationships that require cultivating at the various tiers, it just helps you build that robust support system that meets all the needs that you're gonna have in your life, okay? And again, I'm jumping ahead here, but you have to recognize that this pyramid is not it's not just your pyramid that matters, right? You are on other people's
Y
pyramid whether they recognize that as a tool or not, and so
right,
you have to think, if someone is expecting something of me that is in a higher tier than I actually am in, so I always use the example of driving someone to the airport. If you have to go to San Francisco in the middle of the night to catch an international flight, you should not be asking an acquaintance or a friend for that. That is a big that's a lot to ask. Even though there's probably people in those tiers that would do that for you, I mean, what kind of energy have you invested in that relationship to justify that kind of request? You know what I mean? Like, yes, they
yeah,
would cook a meal for you when you were in the hospital or whatever, but you just gotta manage your expectations of what you deserve from each tier and what you need to put into each tier.
right. Yeah, you have to be mindful about where you fall in other people's friendship pyramids too. Even
Yeah,
if they don't call it a friendship pyramid,
exactly.
you have to think about, okay, where do they where do they rank me?
Yeah. Because if someone who I was an acquaintance with asked me to drive them to San Francisco in the middle of the night, I would say, hard pass. You know, like, I think I remember what your name is. We are acquainted with each other, but, um, no, I will not be doing that. So, and the last thing I wanted to talk about as far as, like, a characteristic of the pyramid is that time and space play a massive role in the friendship pyramid. I'm talking, like, it is my maybe just the biggest factor. And as we break down the tiers in and of themselves, we'll talk about this, but time and space. Okay, so let's break that down. So time, over time your friendships change as you grow up, okay? I could be living next door to someone who I was childhood best friends with. I'm not. My neighbor, I don't even really know my neighbors, um but the time of when we were children to now could have sent us our separate ways, even though proximity, we were just over the fence from each other. Okay. Space, even more so. That is really the thing in my case. The first 16 years of my life, I lived in a different state. So while I still love those people and I still have connection with some of them, that's the space, right? So
Yeah,
it's going to change your pyramid because of the space between you and therefore the time spent together and that kind of thing. So proximity to your people, aka time and space, plays a huge role in where people fall on the pyramid.
and another thing that has a huge impact on the friendship pyramid and kinda similar to time and space is, um, having common friends. So,
Hmm.
when 2 people have a common friend and that friend moves away, then you really see, do we really have a friendship here or are we only friends because of the common friend?
Okay, that just sparked like the most awful memory for me. So let's talk about that really quick. All right, gear up, listener. This is gonna be good. So when I was 16, we were moving to California. Okay. And the weekend before I moved, so I had two very, very close friends, like best friends. Okay. Um, one of them was getting married the weekend that I moved. And because she was moving, or because she was getting married, she was moving away to where her husband lived. And I was so wrapped up in my own move and in my own life season change because that's really what it is. That's kind of how you can like if you wanted to add a label to it, it's a life season, you know, like a season of change. I was so wrapped up in my own that I wasn't thinking until literally years later did I make this revelation that so I was moving, my other friend was getting married, and the third friend was losing her two best friends in basically the same weekend.
That's rough.
I promise you, I that did not cross my mind until, like, 5 years later. Is that not the most horrendous thing? I have felt
That's
guilty about
terrible.
that for so long because I was so wrapped up. Like, we didn't have any sort
Yeah.
of, like, closure. It was, like, craziness of the wedding, and then boom, move 2 days later.
Yeah.
It like,
Oh.
that life season absolutely interrupted, at that time, my friendship pyramid. The
Oh,
friendship
yeah.
pyramid wasn't born back then in my mind, but thinking about it now, and that's another thing you could do with this pyramid. Go back in time in your mind and think, "Okay, how different if I did a pyramid then and I did one now, where are those people different in these tiers? Are these people
Oh,
not
yeah.
even acquaintances anymore? Like, do you not even would you not even consider them like you don't even know them anymore?" Most of the
Yeah.
time, it's gonna be in that they'll have dropped to the acquaintance level for you, but if I did the pyramid then, the 3 people would have been me and the other 2 friends would have been best friends, okay? I had another best friend in there, but it was like a friend of a friend thing, you know? And in the same weekend, this girl's pyramid got absolutely blasted to smithereens. Is that not horrible?
That's awful.
So, just let that be
That
a lesson to you. And please, please think about other people because I didn't, and I am just like, I yeah, it was so years
That
later
is
that I realized
quite
that.
the season for all 3 of you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So when you have this sudden realization, did you reach out to her and be like, "Hey, I didn't realize this until just now. How are you doing?"
No, I didn't, and let this be like a big old warning sign in the road for you is actually the weekend that I realized that is she actually passed away that week. Oh, it was her passing away that made me realize that. And it was not until me and the girl that got married were asked to do her eulogy that I realized that she lost us both in the same weekend, back in
Oh, wow.
that life change. So, that really took a downing a that really took a downturn, but you know what? That's what we wanna talk about in Friendeavor. We don't want it all to be just the good. We gotta work in some life stuff too. So, if for no other reason, just think about that, like, use that as a lesson because I am definitely more cognizant now of reaching out to people that I feel like I am in danger of losing on a friendship level
Mm.
or letting them slip too far down the pyramid because I'm not putting in the work because that was exactly what had happened. And I could make excuses and say, "Oh, I was 16, you know, like I moved across the country. She could have reached out or whatever." But you got to take responsibility, right? Like you are responsible for your friendships. So had I known the things that I know now, would I have reached out? Absolutely. But it was like, you know, it's how the cookie crumbled, and so now I'm more careful to be like aware of those friendships,
Yeah.
of my
Wow.
friendships now.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, you know, when I started Friendeavor, I said it in the very first video. If I only help one person, that's what I want to do. But in reality, I'm no expert. I can only teach what I know, and if if that lesson, you know, lesson that I learned a very, very difficult way can help someone else, then I think that we're doing our mission here at Friendeavor, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And we can all draw on from our past experiences and teach someone else because we all have very, very different stories.
yeah. All right, with that, we're gonna take a quick break, and we will come back to break down the tiers of the friendship pyramid a little bit further. We'll be right back. Thank you for hanging out with us after that break. We are moving into breaking down the actual tiers. So I did quiz Kayla, and she got 4 out of 5 correct. So that's a pass. That's 80%. So,
There you go.
but now we're gonna go ahead and break down the actual tiers themselves. So we're gonna start at the very bottom, and we're gonna start with acquaintanceship. When you think of acquaintanceship, what do you think?
When I think about my acquaintances, I think about people who fall into my bigger circle naturally, either, you know, because of blood or because of being in the same church or being at the same conferences or whatever. People that I like, but not necessarily super vulnerable with, or we're not super close. Those are my acquaintances.
Yeah. So I always think of the church thing too. My example for that is the people that I meet at conferences. Like, I've met them and I know their face, but I honestly might not even remember their name. Um, like, I have sang at this one conference for, I don't know, this will probably be my 8th, ninth year singing here, and there will be people in that choir that have sang with me since the beginning that I know their face, but I don't know their name. And that to me is the definition of an acquaintance, because it's not that I like or dislike them, I just don't even know them, right? But they're still on the outskirts of my life to some extent. You see them once or twice a year. And then of course in a church our size, you go to church with your acquaintances. Like, sometimes you don't even have
Yeah.
a relationship with them. So
Mhm.
so for my description, like, if I was going to give someone a friendship pyramid and put definitions next to it, I would say an acquaintance is someone that you know, but you're not close to them. So, like, you know them, but you're not close to them. You may have met them very briefly, or you just see them around, or you know them through other people. So you have mutual friends. So you're not even saying like a friend of a friend. You're just like, oh yeah, someone that my friend knows. um, your interactions with your acquaintances are gonna be polite, but they're gonna be very, very casual, and you'll talk about
Yeah.
general things. If you work with somebody that is, like, in a different department, that might be an acquaintance to you because you don't have any shared thing other than that you work in the same building or something. Or you probably don't have any common interests that you've discussed. You might like all the same things, but you've never taken the time, or the opportunities never arise to actually get to know them to bump them up to the friend tier. While acquaintances are familiar to you, you don't have to have some deep emotional connection or spend a lot of time together. That is really kind of like the catch all tier for people that you have met and that you kind of know, but you don't really know, and you don't have the desire to carve out time for them, or they for you, or just, like, life. You got your circle,
Yeah.
and they're very, very much on the outskirts of, in, like, the periphery of your life, and you are gonna be an acquaintance to so many people. It's not an insult to be an acquaintance of someone, so don't
Yeah.
take it that way, but it's just that's how life is. You're not gonna be friends with 8 billion people. That's to me, if I was to define it for the pyramid, that's what it would be. Some of the characteristics, you'll like I said, limited familiarity, casual interactions. It's just that's why the acquaintanceship tier is so large. It's a spectrum, because
Yeah.
there are people that I have shook hands with. It's like, hi, my name is Danielle, and then I have seen them, but I've never spoken to them again. And then there's people who are friends of friends who I've seen them almost maybe even regularly, but I have no
Yeah.
relationship with them whatsoever. So,
Yeah.
an acquaintance could literally fall anywhere on that spectrum to me. I feel like your tier for friendship and acquaintance, I'm just taking a stab in the dark here, but I would imagine that yours gets a little blurred sometimes because you're just so nice and you just become friends with everyone you meet. Or if you don't actively choose to be their friend, like, they just fall in love with you and then wanna be your friend. So, I would imagine
Oh
for
my
you,
word.
your 2 tiers could kinda be, like, merged into one.
Yeah, I would definitely say that I have a hard time identifying for myself, um, between the acquaintance and friend tier.
Yeah. And the more people you know, the more it's not like you got "Okay, I can only have 50 acquaintances," because
Yeah.
your best friend tier, and we'll talk about this in a second, but is very small or much smaller. Just because that one is quite small does not mean that the other, like, the bottom one, has to be quite small as well. It's not a ratio like that. It's just a visual model to let you know, "Hey, this one's gonna be bigger." It could be astronomically bigger, but it's just a tool to, like, show you how it works, obviously.
Yeah. So I have an acquaintance story. She was an acquaintance for a few years. We've gone to the same church for years, but I never knew her name just because we sat on opposite sides of the church. We didn't fall into the same circles. So I just never knew her name until she got access to Planning Center, and she emailed me quite a few times because she got my email from Planning Center.
No?
And that's when I learned her name because her picture was on there and her name was on there, and I was like,
And
"Oh,
you just
okay,
you
that's her."
put a face to the name. That
I
is
was
so
like, "Okay,
funny.
that's her name."
I think they took that feature off because of that.
Oh my
Oh,
oh
not
my
that
god.
exact instance, but because people were, like, finding people's
Yeah,
information like that. That's so
yeah.
funny. Hey, you know
Oh,
what? If you wanna make a friend, if you wanna turn an acquaintance into a friend, find their email and email them and see if they wanna be friends. That is a
there you go.
surefire way to fill up your friendship tier.
Oh, yeah.
Which speaking of friendship tier, let's go into that. Friendships are, of course, just, connections with individuals who you hold a certain level of significance in your life, and the certain level is not a ton of significance, but you have some sort of relationship with. And there's one word that defines this for me, or maybe not defines it, but shapes it for me, is camaraderie. Okay. You can have fun with these people. You might even have an ongoing joke. You when you're with each other, which is not that often, it could be once a week, it could be once a month. You are friends with this person and you have some sort of relationship, but it is not an active, ongoing, pursuing growth kind of friendship with these people. So you can
Yeah,
have fun with them and you might even enjoy your time together with them, but it is not all the time. And it is not like you share your hopes and dreams and goals and visions with these people. It's like a
right.
very on the surface relationship. And you can't be upset if it's not as like intimate as it is with higher tiers. Because that's just not that's just in this model, that's what it is.
So this one's really interesting to me because like you said, you're not, pursuing growth with people in this tier and you might not be getting super vulnerable. So, what are the particular qualities that put people into the friendship tier?
If I was to like break it down, I would say like mutualness. Okay, I don't think that's a word, but mutual environment, right? If you work with somebody in like the same department or something, you are naturally going to engage with those people more. And I think that the more you engage with an acquaintance, the more of a friend they become. Again, not super deep, not super time spendy together kind of thing. But if you've got a good friend who has a friend, chances are you're probably going to become their friend too. Mutual environment. You'll see each other semi often. You're going to be in contact in some way, or maybe you don't have contact with them, but you have a good deal of shared history. So, like I was talking about, living in a different state before, there are people who I've not seen in 10 years, but if they walked in my house tomorrow, we would still have a lot to talk about because we have shared history. Okay, we're not actively pursuing friendships with each other or growth in our friendship, but our shared history alone sets us up for success to be friends.
Yeah.
And even if you aren't as close as you are right now, you were at some point in history and you can't ignore that. And if for nothing else, if you don't have anything else in common now, any common interest, your shared history is enough to qualify them as a friend.
Okay, so I have sort of a funny story about this
Go for
friendship
it.
tier. Um, when we were younger, my siblings and I, so mainly my older sister and my younger brother, um, we were not bullies, but we would sit around just to each other and we would talk about funny things people did or said or how they looked when we were very little. So my mother did not like when we engaged in those kind of conversations. And she would always quote, um, man, I forget the reference now, but it's be kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another. She'd always quote that to us. And then she would always refer to the VeggieTales song, the I can be your friend. Okay. Because in the verses, it talks about if you have braces, if your hair's like this, I can be your friend. Okay. It talks about all these things. And I would always I didn't, my little kid self didn't couldn't differentiate between, like, best friends and friends. I was like, "Why is she trying to tell me that all these I have to accept all these people into my life. Like, that's doing
Trying to
too much.
force you to be friends with all these people. Best
I was
friends.
like, "What?" I was like, "Mom, I'm nice to them, but they don't have to be my friend." And she's like, "Yes, yes, you have to be
That's
friends with
so funny.
everyone."
I feel like every mom, I'm not a mother, so I can't say this with all authority, but I think that every mother should have a friendship pyramid and not teach it to their kids because that would probably allow kids to be like, "Oh, well, they're only my acquaintance," or whatever, and it could backfire, but for them to have awareness of, like, where these people fall in our
Yeah.
little minds because we might not be separating them into categories this clearly, but in our minds, we know who we're really close with and who we're not close with.
Yes, yes.
Alright, Quizzer, you can't think of what that reference is? If I give you the
No,
book,
can
would you be
you?
able to? No, I just looked it up. I cheated.
Oh, if you told me the book, maybe, maybe.
Okay. Or if I okay, well, you know it's the New Testament. Ephesians.
4?
Yes!
22.
No! Oh, you're, like, close, but you're not close. It's 32.
Oh,
Ephesians
see?
4:32.
Okay, okay. I still
I
got it.
yeah,
I
I
s
cheated though, I looked it up. I had to give you the book and the verse, but you got the chapter.
Yes.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah. My mom used to I think that's where this all stems from is our moms teaching us to be good people, and we
Mhm.
resented that so much when we were kids, like, "Don't tell me how to live my life." Um,
Yes.
but, like, Kara, she's got this story, and maybe she'll tell it on here someday, but of how my mom would be doing her hair and, like, before school, and our hairstyle, it's called Buffy's. We would do
Buffy's.
2 pigtails coming out on either side. It was so cute. I mean, like, on a little kid, it's adorable. On an adult, it would look horrifying, but on 2 on either side, and she'd be doing her hair, and, "Now, Kara, you need to be nice to everybody. You gotta be the same all the time," you know? So, yeah, that's a
Sounds like
great
Kim and
story.
Karen.
Kim and Karen through and through, that is correct. Oh, that's funny. Alright, let's move on to tier 3. Tier 3. Pop quiz. What is tier 3?
Tier 3 is good friends.
There we go. I knew you'd get it eventually. This is where it starts getting interesting because you might think, why is there a category called good friends and a category called best friends? Good friends are different from best friends, and I will tell you why. Good friends are individuals who you genuinely care about. Okay, check. That's also the same for best friends, and you consider an important part of your life. They hold a significant place in your heart, even if you don't spend substantial amount of time together. In this tier,
Mm,
the level of connection and bond is deeper than the friendship tier, but not as and this is the difference, is not as, like, close or intimate as the best friend tier. Good friends, they're not necessarily involved in every aspect of your life, okay? But they play a significant role in offering support, driving you to San Francisco in the middle of the night, understanding, okay? They understand you, maybe not as well as a best friend does, but even if they don't understand, they show significant empathy towards you, and they're willing to support you, um, and just offer companionship. They're individuals you can rely on and consider an important part of your social support system, but it all goes back to time spent together. If I took a good friend and spent a month with them nonstop, well, with some stops so that we weren't getting tired of each other, but someone could literally be elevated to a best friend if I just seriously took the time to invest as much time. But the good thing
yeah,
is you don't have to. You don't have to. It's totally, totally acceptable to have good friends that
yep,
don't have to be your best friend. Not every single person has to be your best friend. And more importantly, I would say you don't have to be everyone's best friend.
yeah,
You see those people that they and I want to be careful here because I don't want to, come across as rude or whatever, but I just want to help somebody so they don't get hurt. If you feel like, "Oh, yeah, they're my best friend, they're my best friend, they're my friend." "Oh, bestie, bestie, bestie." And I know that's, like, colloquial these days, but friendship is so important that if you don't have the distinguishing things, you could start to believe somebody is your bestie, and then they end up treating you like a friend or something like that. And
Yeah.
it could be hurtful.
Yeah. And when you can't be honest with yourself or take the time to categorize these people into these tiers, then you end up with the new bestie every couple weeks
Oh, yes.
because they weren't actually your bestie in the first place.
That is actually my favorite video that I've ever done. It's called The Revolving Door because when I had this thought in this revelation, and I'll briefly go over it in a second, it just helped me understand. It didn't help me understand myself, but it helped me understand other people, and it helped me understand how I could help them or how I could perceive them. So it's not helping them to help them, it's helping me to understand them. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kinda
Right.
weird,
It's
but
not like they're your charity case, but it's helping you understand where they're coming from.
and
So
not be so
you don't
judgmental because
instantly.
I
Yeah.
would just like, "Oh, yeah, they're best friends with someone else again this week." And that's what the revolving door is for anyone who's not seen that video, which we can link in the show notes, is you know of people, and in my case, they're typically in my friend tier. Just that's just a side note, is like these people are in my friend tier who cycle through best friends every I don't wanna put a time frame on it, but from my point of view of where I have, like, intently studied it is every, like, 8 to 15 months or, like, 10 to 18 months. Literally, they will go a year and a half of just swearing up and down that this person is their best friend, and they spend so much time together. They put if you catch them in the right season, they will be in their wedding. If they it's just it's kind of it's really
That's such
interesting,
a good
honestly.
one.
And the weird thing is, if you're friends with them during that time, but you are no longer you have a falling out of some sort, even a month after they and they get engaged, you will not be in their wedding. I've seen that happen like 4 times. That's not an exaggeration. I just sit back and watch things unfold, and then I turn and tell the person next to me what I just saw. Um, which is basically
That's
what this
why
podcast is.
I'm sorry.
I'm turning to all the listeners and telling them what I have seen in my life.
Yes. Side note, and we might even wanna do a whole episode on this one day.
Mm.
It's okay to be selective with your bridesmaids.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you're worried about offending people for XYZ or offending other people because you didn't choose this person as bridesmaid, you need to re-examine that relationship
Mm.
or those reasons.
We gotta add that to the list. Don't let me forget. We gotta add that to the list. Going back to good friends, they share genuine care and concern for another. They share a bond of trust. These are all some notable attributes. You can still have a meaningful conversation. It's very typical that you have shared values and beliefs. Those values and beliefs might actually be the foundation that your relationship is built on. My good friends, I wouldn't say all of them because I can't like sit down and make a list, but primarily my good friends are all out of my church. We have a shared foundation, and that's where I met them actually. That's why a lot of people in the church marry people from their same church because you
Yeah.
know what they believe and you know the foundation they have. So that's where you know that your shared values and beliefs are a foundation. You definitely see a steep decline in the amount of people in this tier, which is the point, right? Like the higher on the tier, the less people there are because even if you're not with these people all the time, you're still sharing meals with them. You're still inviting them into your home. And actually, as we move into examples of this, and I'll give you a second to think of any examples that you want to bring up, but my perfect example for this is actually your family, Kayla. So prior to marrying my brother, our families were good friends. Like, we spent time together, we were at each other's houses sometimes, and your older sisters are people that I bounce ideas off to this day. So, they're good friends. And so it was just, the will of God that you would end up marrying into my family. But even if you hadn't, your sisters would still be people that I would consider good friends. And then, like I mentioned before, shared space and shared responsibility or duty is another great foundation. So, the people that I work with in the music department at the church, we spend hours. over the span of the last 10 years, we have spent literally countless hours together
Yeah.
rehearsing and practicing and teaching and learning, and you are
Working toward a
bound
common goal.
yes, you are bound to build good friendships with these people when you spend that much time with them. So the
Yeah.
shared environment has literally elevated people out of a friend category into a good friend category because of the time and the environment, the shared space, and the shared responsibility of working towards the same goal. It's quite interesting to see, honestly, and I'll let you talk about your experience here in a second, but is when someone does step away from that role, like barely see them. And it's like almost instantly comes to a friendship tier where they were a good friend. Again, that's not a positive or a negative, it's just how it happens. Um, but the second they step back from the music department, I don't see them 4 or 5 hours a
Yeah.
week. So,
Yeah.
therefore, I'm not gonna be having as much time and shared experience with them.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I think, something that dramatically shifted my friendship pyramid was getting married and spending more time with my husband's friends, and my husband spending more time with my friends, spending more time with my husband's family, and, spending less time with other people, developing new desires for, like, what I want out of a friendship,
Mhm.
because my husband's a lot older than me, and he helps me put things into perspective.
And you help him put things into
Oh.
perspective too.
Yes, we're very great, we balance each other. So I would say that that event in my life dramatically shifted my friendship pyramid. Um, like, there's some people that moved up 2 tiers, some people moved down 2 tiers.
Yeah, and I wanna stress that it's not a bad thing. It's really
Yes,
not. If
absolutely.
someone has taken a tumble out of your best friend tier down to your friend tier, and they have issue with that, they should be fighting tooth and nail to rebuild that friendship with you, okay? This is not a one-way street. This is not a everyone is the main character energy, right? You are also responsible for the friendships or your placement in other people's friendship pyramids. If you want to be someone's best friend, guess whose job it is to build that relationship? Both of yours, not just the one person. And so, you said getting married. If someone who took issue with that, they could still ask you out to lunch. They could still say, "Hey, I'm having a game night. Come over." And that would be the steps to take to rebuild what they thought had been lost.
Yeah.
That is interesting to think about that though, that Brett's friends are now on your pyramid, whereas before they could have just been not on your pyramid or now or were acquaintances.
Yeah,
Again, shared space
definitely.
and experience helps to elevate those friendships. That's just how it works. I don't make the rules, I just write them down. Alright, moving on to tier number 4, best friendship. This is the one that a lot of people get tripped up on because they think there needs to be more people than there are. And I've heard it said before that you are lucky or blessed, however you wanna think about it, to have 5 best friends over your lifetime. I think they said good friends, but for the purposes of how we're categorizing things, I'm gonna change it to best friends. You are blessed to have 5 best friends over the span of your lifetime.
Okay, at first I thought you were gonna say, "At a time." And I'm like, "Woo!"
No, 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 no. The adage
Okay,
is 5 over your entire lifetime. So, like,
that
they
makes
think of
sense.
that as, like, your best friend in elementary school, and then you got one in high school, and then you've got your college friends, like, maybe your roommate, and then maybe someone you went into business with. I'm just kind of throwing out options here or
Yeah,
whatever. But essentially, they say, like, that's what you're blessed to have that over your lifetime. I think that it can be more than that if you put in the effort, but I also recognize that you're not gonna have 20, 25, 30 meaningful best friendships in that
yes.
tier. That's just how it is. I mean, and I also wanna say, before we actually break this down, is that so I've said before, I've got 3 people in my friend group, okay? But just because I'm best friends with 3 people does not mean that I don't have another best friend in that tier. They're just not in that friend group, right? They don't hang out with me regularly, but I still have a connection to that person of a best friendship level. And, I think that's important to say that your friend group can actually have people from different tiers in your friend group. You can have friends
Yeah,
and good friends and best friends that you hang out with in your quote unquote friend group that you do things with. Um, I just so happen to have my friend group that I regularly hang out with be my 3 best friends. Doesn't have to be. That's just kinda how, like I said, the cookie crumbled for me, or the chips fell, or the cards were dealt, how whatever slang term you wanna use.
Okay, so let's talk about the description of a best friend.
Alright, so just like the other ones, you cherish them, you love them, that kinda thing, and
Mm.
again, we've already touched on this a little bit as a comparison to a good friend, but essentially, these are the people that you are actively choosing to share your life with. You are actively choosing to spend time with them. You are actively choosing to give them a piece of your heart and choose them as family. Some people I am very, very blessed to come from a very healthy, strong family who I love dearly, okay? I don't count my family members on my friendship tier because that is a completely different thing for me. Ironically, my sister is one of the 3 in the best friend tier, but I can't even truly say, like, that they're in there because it's an entirely different spectrum, right?
Yeah,
And then now you as my sister-in-law, like, you're on the family spectrum. It's not you can't be categorizing your family as your friends because it's just 2 different things. Some
yeah,
people are not so blessed. They come from broken families and they choose people to share their life with, and their chosen family as a description is their best friend. Their best friend
yes,
is who they've chosen to be their family. The key features and qualities of a best friend, it's not too terribly different. It's love, acceptance, that shared experience. That you've got the classic one. Oh, we've been best friends since we were in diapers. The blonde to the brunette, the all that kind of thing. Like that's the classic portrayal of best friends is your mom's your best friend, so now you're best friends. It doesn't have to be like that. I'm an example of it
right.
doesn't have to be that way. I met my friends when I was 16, and I am proudly claim to this day that I forced them to be my friends, and it's the best thing that I've ever done, you know?
Yeah.
And because we can get into that in another episode, but that's a little spoiler alert. I forced my best friends to be my best friend. But then of course you've got the trust and the loyalty. You could think back to the trust episode. You've got emotional support in your highs and your lows. Some people will only support you in your lows. That is another thing we could talk about in a different episode is that sometimes you have highs that people cannot get behind you and support you in.
Mm,
Your acquaintances and your friends, when you do something new and you got a good experience, they might not be as supportive of you than when you're going and you're down and out because it's easy to feel bad for someone when they're in a low
yeah,
point in their life.
it's
It's
attention
hard
grabbing.
yeah, and it's hard to get behind someone who maybe seems to be succeeding more than you or that kind of thing. So your best friends are highs and lows. And then really what it boils down to, this is my favorite quality of a best friend is intuitive understanding. Okay, that's kind of a big phrase, but let me break it down. So, not only does my shared history with my best friends allow for like humor because we've got the same references and we remember the same things, and we've got the same like, oh, remember when that happened? But a lot of the time we know where someone is going with something
Mm,
before it even happens. They're like intuitively understanding me because of our time spent together and our shared experience and our life and all that stuff. So to me that's the most important part of a best friend is intuitively understanding each other. And you see this a lot in sisters. Um and it's just an incredibly special quality in a friendship that I think is the most desired in people who wish that they have what other people have.
yeah,
When people
yeah,
say people have come up to us and said, "I wish I had friends like you have." That has literally happened more than once, and it's not because of anything I've done other than, the time and energy spent, but
yeah,
it's
investing.
because they see and they perceive the intuitive understanding and connectivity between us that's just desirable. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants to be understood, and to see
Yeah,
that and practice in somewhere else makes you that's what you want.
yeah, and usually we don't like to refer to the cliches because they set super high expectations for friendships and best friendships.
Mhm.
But the cliche, the intuitive understanding is what made me think of it, is they finish each other's sentences.
Yeah,
But in some best friend cases,
that
this is
actually happens.
true. It really happens because you have that intuitive understanding, that shared history. It's like, "Okay, I know where she's going with this."
Yeah. That actually
Wonderful.
real life happened to me a couple weeks ago, is that we were playing a game, and I'm not gonna take the time to go through the story because it wouldn't even be funny to you guys, but she pulled out a reference that I have said since we've been friends, so 10 years. It never occurred to me that she's ever even heard me say that, right? But she said it, like, she's never said it before, but in an actual reactive, genuine moment, she said the thing that I have alone said for the last 10 years, and I was like, "Oh my word, you get me." It was just a reminder, it was an understanding, like,
Oh,
that
yeah.
is intuitive understanding. That's what
Yeah.
it is, and the only way to build that is by putting in the work, putting in the effort, putting in the time
Yeah.
together. It There's not a guidebook. I mean, I could write one, but it's gonna say, "Make it work," you know? Don't bicker,
Yeah.
don't fight, don't tear each other down, elevate each other, spend time together, love each other,
Yep.
and that's how you build a best friend.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be intentional. Okay, Danielle, can you tell us why it's so important to have this best friend tier? Because I know from experience, I went through a short season where I genuinely didn't think it was important because I had a lot of people that I loved, a lot of people that loved me.
Mhm.
I had friends, or I had family, I had friends, good friends. Um, but maybe just because of laziness or being busy, I didn't think it was important to invest time into having best friends.
I can totally see
So,
where people would think that because
yeah,
even having a pyramid in of itself, it's like, again, going back to the categorization, why do we have to split people up into groups? It's not to say one is better than the other, but it's kinda hard for me to expressly say why best friends are important because it's kinda one of those things, you don't know what it is until you have it, and
yeah,
conversely, you don't know what you had until you lost it. So if you don't put in the work, you don't put in the effort, if you lose what you had, it'll be that much harder for you to get it back, and you might feel this emptiness or this void or whatever. Best friends are often considered, like, they have a connection with you, maybe even, like, connected to your soul if you wanna think about it that way. That's mostly a spousal thing, but
yeah,
depending on where you are in life and how long you've known each other and, again, that intuitive understanding, it's really the value of depth and understanding and support cannot be, you can't put a price tag on that. So a best friend is not, like, the ultimate tier, like, not your goal is not to strive is to have your name in everyone's best friend tier. You gotta have that person, and you gotta be that person who brings joy, who brings comfort, who brings a sense of belonging. I belong in this person's life. They belong in mine,
mhm,
and I don't ever wanna lose that, and if, God forbid, I did, I hope I have the understanding and the wherewithal to help build that in someone else because I don't ever wanna lose that. Best friends are just, you just gotta treasure them, cherish them, and recognize that it is truly a pillar in your life that helps hold it all together. Your emotional support, your companionship, all that stuff.
yeah. Because there's an element of best friendship, the emotional support, the memories made that your siblings, your parents, your spouse cannot provide for you.
Yeah.
Not that your best friend should replace your spouse for emotional support. You need emotional support from your spouse. But there are things that your girlfriends can provide for you that your husband cannot, and that's okay.
Yeah. I'm actually glad that you brought up spouse because that is tier 5. That is the last tier. And as we wrap up here, we're not going to dive into this one because we are a friendship channel. And that tier has got so much to it biblically and spiritually and emotionally and physically that it's really outside of our scope of practice here. Even though one of us is married,
Yeah.
like we just we'll dive into this topic in the future
Yeah.
with someone who is knowledgeable about this. But for this friendship pyramid episode, we're just going to go ahead and stop with the 4 tiers. Before we wrap up, I did want to say that there are a few things that will move people throughout the tiers. We've touched on this a little bit. Time and space are really the biggest ones. But that is not just a negative thing. Separation, time together, and coming together adds people to your friendship pyramid that you never had even met before. Someone that you had never even met a year ago can move into your neighborhood or move to your church, and then within 1 year, you're like, how did I live my life up to this point without knowing this person? You know?
Yeah.
So time, shared experience, that moves people in and out of tears. Having an emotional connection, right? Having a trauma, like if you have a shared trauma, that's horrible, but it is kind of like baptized by fire, so to speak. You could go from being acquaintances to being good friends essentially overnight if you have a shared positive or negative experience. You got your shared values, your life circumstances, jobs, moving, marriage, that kind of thing. Prioritization and investment that will move people out of tears faster than anything else. You prioritize one person or another. Hey,
Yep.
guess what? Someone's going to move up, someone's going to move down, or maybe not even move in and out, but just that's just kind of how like it happens. Again, these are not all negatives. It's just how life works. And then of course proximity. If you don't if you don't live in the same city as your best friend anymore, first of all, I'm sorry that that happened to you. But second of all, you can still fight to keep that relationship alive. You don't have to let it die just because you moved away or your friend got married and your other friend moved away in the same weekend. So like it doesn't have to be the end. It can be it can still be strong and you don't have to let the changes beat you.
I really enjoyed having this discussion this week, um, because I think it's really important that we talk about the friendship pyramid and why this is not like a toxic concept. And I
Yeah, it
think we
doesn't have to be.
really, yes, we dove into that really well, I think, and you described it perfectly and why
Thank
it's
you.
important and why it's effective.
Okay, before we wrap up, I have a new segment for us.
Oh no.
I think in Friendeavor the podcast, we should play a weekly game of Would You Rather.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yes,
Are you
and
sure? Do you want me to make them up?
no, you are not going to be in charge of making them up. You are not allowed to because you are like that other person who does horrible ones. So I will be in charge of Would You Rathers.
I can make them so
I
challenging.
know. That's why we're going to make them easy and fun and not horrible. I don't know. You can earn a spot in Would You Rather, but you got to really work for it. Okay.
Okay,
So,
hit me with your best shot.
would you rather? Would you rather have a rewind button, like to rewind your life, or a fast forward button to go forward in your life?
That's actually something I've thought of before. I think it would be rewind. Just because, okay, if you think about it, if you had a fast forward button, you can't change the past, right? But if you had a rewind button, you could change the past and the future.
So, when I first read this one, I was like, "Oh, I love these ones that make you think and make you come up with a reason why." So, in my mind when I read this, it was like a rewind or fast forward like you're watching these things happen. So you can't necessarily affect it, but that was what it was to me. So the fact that you saw it
Oh,
differently, I think that's really cool because it shows that people think of things differently. I would rather have a rewind because I would like to go back and watch the good things happen again. Fast forward, you're spoiling it. Like I'm not gonna lie, I would like to know what's coming down the pipe for me, but
yeah.
I mean, if you know something's gonna happen or what if something bad happened, then you're just dreading it. So you're wasting your life dreading whatever's gonna happen instead of enjoying what has happened. You feel?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is with your perspective, so just watching and not being a part of it, I would actually change my answer to fast forward to the future if
That
I
is
was just
why
spectating.
we play Would You Rather? Would you rather? All right, everybody,
Ah, that was
that
good.
wraps up this week's episode. Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with us. Next week, we are diving into the topic of introverts and extroverts and how that affects your friendship, what that means, that kind of thing. So please be on the lookout for that episode next week.
This one's going to be great, guys, because it's applicable to everyone. Everyone can relate. Everyone can learn from this episode. So be on the lookout. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast. And we will see you next week.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you then. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of Friendeavor the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's content, leave a review and share with a friend. You can find the show notes on our website, www.friendeavor.net, and in the description of this episode.
Friendship is a journey. It's an endeavor. We'll see you next time on Friendeavor.